Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Today we're joined by Sahil Shaik-Muzawar, an urban planner and geographer based in Dubai. Holding an MSc from the University of Birmingham, Sahil has been working towards shaping the contextually sensitive urban fabrics across the region. He is a young urbanist from the Academy of Urbanism based in the UAE. He is also a part of RTPI's Middle East Young Planners Network. He brings a unique blend of technical knowledge and passion for people-centered design. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Sahil. Pleasure to have you on.
Good to be with you.
Awesome. So, your introduction is quite unique. I don't think we've ever had a geographer on the show before.
Yeah.
A bunch of urban planners, sure. So I think that's an interesting place to start off, which is how did you find urban planning, or did urban planning find you? Was that the game plan kind of from age 5 that this is what I want to do?
Not really, but you could say Dubai really shaped that sort of career pathway for me. So I was born and raised in Dubai. I grew up in the mid-2000s, a time when Dubai saw, a massive boom in construction. So literally everywhere you went, there was some sort of construction happening. Bridges were being built, overpasses were being built, buildings just skyrocketed out of nowhere. And that sort of brought about some degree of curiosity in me. So I began to go on long walks in my early teenage years. Like I would go out of my house, wouldn't be back for the next 3-4 hours, just wandering around new neighborhoods in the city, thinking about some of the key differences I would find in the new parts of the city compared to the other ones, particularly, as to like, why does a certain demographic of people based on their wealth and ethnic origin live in certain parts of the city where, the other ones are, inhabited by some other people, basically. Why is there some sort of divide or segregation, let's say, in this ever expanding city? In the mid-2000s, Dubai was really expanding. We know now, on average, Dubai expands, let's say, doubles its size every 15 years. But in the mid-2000s, Dubai was the place to be, really. You could literally see the city transition itself. And these 3-4 hour long walks across the city, I would later come to know that these are called, the proper term in the industry for this is transect walks. The early teenage kid in me didn't realize that. This was driven purely out of curiosity. But that sort of began that eagerness to learn about this sort of phenomena, you could say. So geography is all about human to human and human to nature relations. Essentially, how do people use their space? And that's what led me into the social sciences, particularly geography, you could say. Urban planning, that sort of specialization emerged during my bachelor's years. I knew that Dubai was the place to be for me, not just because I was born and raised here. Of course, I knew the place well, but there was like so much new stuff to see still in the city. It was an ever transforming city. It still is. But it just seemed right to do urban planning in Dubai, talking like 2020, 2021, back when the government had just announced the Dubai 2040 master plan. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to get like a scholarship at the current program that I had studied through. And yeah, that's my story so far.
I feel like in some way, shape or form, most urban planners or even architects to a certain extent, or the curious creative, as I call them, has probably done something quite similar to what you did going on those walks. So I'm curious, you probably might have to dig back into the archives, but anything that stood out at that time? I mean, obviously you're asking questions about why certain, demographics are where they are in the city, but any other findings that you came across where you're like, didn't realize that was there, and now I know this, anything like that?
I think I got to know how the city shapes people's minds I got to know what people think about the concept of space, what public space means to them. In other parts of the world, a public space, in a very brief, simple sense, would be defined as, a place where you spend much of your time outside your household for recreational purposes, for work, for shopping, etc. In this part of the world, amidst the transition, I witnessed, people spending their time in shopping malls. They claimed these were public spaces for them. You really witnessed the commercialization of space, I would say. That's something I've witnessed growing up here.
Right. I mean, I suppose that has a bit to do with the climate as well, right? I mean, I can recall, similar to yourself, being here as a kid in sort of, 45-degree July heat. There's not much one can do publicly outside in the fresh air. So you kind of tend to go to spaces which tend to be air conditioned, or at least well ventilated, to say the least. So yeah, that's an interesting insight. That would make sense as to why they sort of popped up in the pace that they did. Because, I remember back in the day, there was kind of like WAFI kind of was the spot to be. And then there was this whole like, this thing called a city center in Data. That was like the new thing. And now it's kind of like, how do you even have a community without one of these? It's
Right.
it's sort of become a norm now. Interesting. Okay. So that brings you've sort of done this, journey. You found this sort of niche sector that you're in, I like to say. What is of interest to you right now at the moment? As in, what are you sort of going after? What are you thinking about? What's on your mind?
I'm just following my passion. So that's urban planning and related disciplines, really. That also includes transport planning with a keen interest in sustainability and GIS as well. And it does sound, that sort of background, geography and then urban planning does sound niche to many people I've talked to in this part of the world, particularly because the market isn't really there for it. It hasn't developed as much, you could say. So just to give you an example, like I studied at a British university. The program I studied was a Master of Science in Urban Planning. Now, in my class, I was the sole geographer. I believe I still am. One of my professors has been saying probably the only pure sort of social scientist background in your class. Yeah. More than half of the class has got a degree in architecture, followed by civil engineering. Right. Apart from me, there's one economist person who had graduated.
Economics is an interesting sort of background to come into this with, I must say.
Absolutely. Urban planning is an umbrella term. It just doesn't simply include urban design. Yeah. Let's take the example of this classroom, for example. For the same program at the UK campus, more than half the class had a background in geography. Social scientists were in the majority there. Architects were the minority, followed by, civil engineers. So it really gives you an idea of the market we're in. It's the same program, it's a same topic, urban planning, but because of how things work, because of how the industry works, the market, you could say the disciplinary input in the market is quite distinct, quite different, I would say. Here it's more into the technical disciplines. You seek architects, civil engineers, etc., because the priority here is investment rather than, community-related projects.
Right. True, also true. However, having said that, I did want to pick your brain on a couple of other things as well, which is the Dubai market is obviously quite hot with projects at the moment, right? Sort of over the years, there have always been these individual projects. So like, a couple of towers here, a couple of this there, whatever. But I think over the last few months, we've seen two major master plans be announced. Well, master plan communities be announced, basically. What is of interest to me is the one which ARM are doing, which is the sort of refurbishment, you could say almost, of the Jebel Ali racecourse, which is a massive, massive plot. And then BIA, I think in Sharjah, have also announced another development right next to the Arada development, which is also quite massive in size. These are kind of hundreds of square kilometers, basically. Nice. So I'm kind of wanted to get your opinion, not so much on these projects, but what are you hoping to see that these projects achieve? As in, we obviously have, the public realm that we're in, which is all well and good. It's not perfect by any means. It can be improved. What are you looking or hoping that these projects probably have, because they're going to be starting from scratch?
Right. So I would say the very first thing after the announcement of these projects that came to my mind was, since they are making closed so-called sustainable communities, I would expect them to emerge as 15-minute neighborhoods, really. A space where everything is available within a 15-minute walk, more or less, at least your daily needs. But, BIA, of course, is a major player in the sustainability market, and it entering the developer side it came as a big surprise. People didn't really know much about such an announcement. Just about a few days before the actual official announcement, we came to know that BIA is planning to launch a master plan community. Yeah. It is a contrast to the principle of sustainability, in my opinion, when you marry it to urban planning. On one hand, you are creating or planning to create a so-called sustainable community, be it how much ever sustainable it can. If it creates its own electricity on the spot by using solar panels, or if it recycles water or whatever, you can be sustainable on that basis. But let's take the example of BIA. Let's remain with that example in Sharjah. It's being constructed on the outskirts of the city, on the very limits of what is now the municipal boundaries of the city of Sharjah. On one hand, you're building something sustainable, or something that could become sustainable. However, on the other hand, you're willingly embracing urban sprawl. These are low-density neighborhoods. Much of the proportion of the plots are being handed over to townhouses. There will always be demand for this, considering the market, as you said, it is very hot, but simply putting it through the urban planning lens and the sustainability lens as well, considering the amount of sprawl that it would add, it may not ultimately be sustainable because, it's so far away from the town center of Sharjah. People have to commute to the town center, which is like 30 kilometers away. There's no proper means of public transport in that part of Sharjah. That street filled with cars. You are indirectly encouraging car-based culture. I know this firsthand because I used to intern at a government office in Sharjah. I know several of my colleagues who were there had recently moved to the outskirts of the city because there are massive developments coming up there. The place is near Bia's new development, basically. And they have said, because of this, because there aren't any other mode of transportation, because it's so far away from the city, their daily commutes exceeding 1 hour, basically. This is commuting within the city. So such a project in itself, yes, it is sustainable, but if it were to be developed elsewhere, let's say in the UK, for example, solely on the basis of sustainability, I don't think this would have been approved. That being said, however, because of how the market works, because how industry works over here, if certain adjustments were to be made to support this project, proper public transport services were to be provided from the town center, if traffic mitigation efforts were to be, implemented, if there was proper access from the actual core city of Sharjah to this neighborhood, I think it can be a success. This nation has proved people wrong on so many different levels.
Yeah, I think it's more of definitely an issue for sure. If you think about these projects almost becoming like nodes across the city.
Yeah.
Just by going further away, you kind of create much more traffic just by your location. I completely get that. Although, just to play devil's advocate, I think that's more of a municipal problem than it is the actual project. I think sort of to almost, use the disadvantage to an advantage. I suspect that because our project is so far out and it is going to generate, triple the amount of trips or whatever it is to the main city center, if you would,
right.
I think that would act as a catalyst to the actual municipal organization, knowing that, hey, we have to do something now because this is in 3 years, 5 years time going to be an even bigger problem if we don't address it now.
Right.
So I suppose it's more of a glass half full type situation. Like in my mind, the more of these that happen, the better it is because it will force someone's hand somewhere to do something. But then on the flip side, if no one does anything, it's an even bigger problem. So, but like you said, I think this country in general has proven many people wrong over the years. So hopefully it does work out. Interesting. Good take. I never really thought of it that way, right? Because you always look at projects almost in isolation, and I'm guilty of it as well. But when you sort of think of it at a city planning level, I can see what the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, this is where new and trendy concepts like systems thinking come into play, right? Systems thinking, for example, it's not just about thinking of a certain component of a system. Let's say in this case, a certain large-scale project master plan in a large city. It's about understanding what sort of effects it would have in the entire system, what this could result in essentially. It's about looking, let's say, zooming out and looking at the entire process rather than a single component.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So again, just for the audience who are probably tuning in and have a background in, say, urban planning or are looking to get into urban planning even, anything that you can share with them in terms of key learnings that you've had or interesting findings that you've had, not necessarily even for this region, but just in general as part of practice, anything that you can share with them?
Yeah, something that springs to mind quite instantly, I would say, is a project experience I had in the world of research, actually. So a couple of years back, while I was still at university, I worked as a research assistant on a certain project in Ras Al Khaimah. The project itself, it was about understanding people's relationship with public spaces in Ras Al Khaimah. So we basically went out to collect data, essentially in the method of surveying. It was all about collecting primary information. We asked people what public space means to them, basically, and if they could name the top 3 public spaces in Ras Al Khaimah that they visit quite frequently. And this was only open to, residents and citizens of Ras Al Khaimah, essentially, people who lived there, who used the space frequently. It turns out, as I suspected, the idea of public space in people's mind is quite different from what we as practitioners and academics understand public space to be. The top 3 response, we collected more than 500 to 600 responses, physically going up to people and asking them to fill this up, asking them questions, that sort of thing. Out of these 500, 600 surveys you you could say 99% of them had written at least two of the spots were filled with shopping malls. So, this mall is my top go-to public space, followed by this mall.
Yeah.
And the third one usually tends to be a landmark, let's say Jebel Jais, which is like far outside the actual city of Ras Al Khaimah.
Right.
So when we ask people what do they think about public spaces and their most visited public spaces, in their mind what they think about is like, what are the top 3 landmarks in Ras Al Khaimah? Now, solely based on this response, if we were to consider people's opinion, the top 3 public spaces in Ras Al Khaimah would be, 2 shopping malls and a landmark right outside, far outside the city.
A mountain, essentially.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. 50 years ago, UAE didn't have any shopping malls. Does that mean the UAE didn't have any public space? Of course not. It's about how, I think this is one method, how design shapes people's minds.
Right.
They start to look at a place in a certain lens. I spoke about how 99% of the people had this same response. I could only find one exception, one gentleman who was a low-wage earner working at a little cafeteria. Interestingly, he had the response that he didn't visit any public space at all. That was his response. So naturally, I asked him, like, what do you do in your spare time? Like, where do your friends come and meet you? He said, just outside the cafeteria. That was his spot. Like, everyone comes to meet him over there. He used to hang out with them over there. I asked him, well, where do you go and shop? He said, like, just a 2-minute walk away, there's a shopping center, essentially. That's where he used to get all his shopping needs for the month. Now, unbeknownst to him, that 1 kilometer radius from that cafeteria spot had become his public space. Unknowingly, of course, he didn't know this. This is what I believe is lacking. This is something that I couldn't find written in my, academic modules, how, especially in this local context, how people view space. What does public space mean to them? So this was, I think, an interesting eye-opener.
Okay. So in your mind, what do you think the solution is? Because yes, it's a problem, definitely. It is an issue if people think that malls are your public space. I completely agree. But like I said earlier, I can also see why that is.
Yeah.
So is there... And I think maybe you touched upon it just briefly, that yes, 50 years ago, there were no malls. So what was the public space? So have you sort of looked into that, and what really was the public space? How does that translate into 2025? What does that sort of traditional space look like today?
Absolutely. So, I mean, back in the day, the major congregation spots used to be the local bazaars or the local souks,
right,
followed by the mosques, especially the Friday prayer mosques. That's where people would congregate. Once the prayers are done, people leave, get along with their shopping, which usually is located right next to the mosque itself. And this is a recurring theme across all regions, like across this region, the MENA region. If you look at several other cities with a similar sort of climate, let's take many Moroccan cities, for example, Marrakesh, Rabat, etc. The olden parts of the cities are designed around like a main mosque in the city. People would congregate, followed by an inner circle of local souks and bazaars, the local markets where people would shop. And these were all very compact, so as to provide maximum amount of shading, because wide open spaces, they radiate much more heat. That's a fundamental principle, basically. And this is how people got along, really. This is how people socialized.
Right. Okay.
So coming back to your second part of the question, how that translates here today, we know that, back in the day, these small scale cafes or coffee shops, you could say, where people would have a cup of qahwa, sit down on a bench and talk with each other. This was what it was like hanging out with your friends. When we looked at the young demography, the young group of people from this study in Ras Al Khaimah, we noticed that nearly all of them would love to visit coffee shops, which are often far away from the city. So why not include that sort of traditional urbanism or traditional urban lifestyle, you could say, in modern design? If you were to design community or a space with one focal center that could be your main congregation spots, followed by, like a coffee shop, as we are seeing in some new developments, I think that would sort of bring back that old charm.
True. And to be honest, I'm very guilty of that also. I have been known to get in a combustion engine car and drive, creating a highly large carbon footprint for an even larger carbon footprint on the coffee that I get, because those beans probably flew halfway across the world to get to me.
Right.
So yeah, I get that. That makes sense. But again, to sort of then dial it back, right? I mean, we're looking at the ideal situation, right? Wherein people have no need to leave these communities that they're in, right? Wherein you have everything there, meaning you have of course, your daily essentials for sure, but even sort of long-term lifestyle requirements in terms of schools, hospitals, etc., etc. To get all of those typically is quite difficult within these community developments, if you may.
Right.
So again, to then go a bit macro, if we were to look at city planning in general, right? Transport obviously makes a big difference. Maybe there's a solution there. I'd be interested to know what you think about that, because if, the reality is that every developer is going to be, to an extent, commercially driven, as they probably should be, I think, even that's the reality of the world we live in. Is there a solution in the transport realm? Can we do something there wherein you don't have, like you mentioned earlier, your colleagues having to do a 1-hour commute in the city? Maybe they still do the commute, but that commute's only 10 minutes. Does that make a difference? Does that help?
Oh boy, we'll be here sitting for hours talking about that, really, because there's so much to talk about. Because, to our listeners, like if you've ever lived in the UAE, if you've ever traveled between Dubai and Sharjah during peak hours on a regular working day, you'll know what I'm talking about. I think a key sort of element that people miss out when planning transport in this part of the world, well, at least they've been historically missing out, I would say, is integration. So elsewhere in the world, when you think about transport, you don't just look at your city, but what's right next to your city. If it's part of an urban area, if it's part of a larger metropolitan area. In Dubai, sadly, it's been designed in such a way that it's only useful for Dubai residents. Although we know that Dubai is the economic center of the larger Dubai Sharjah Ajman metropolitan area, which in total approaches like 6 million people. 6 million residents, basically, with Dubai accounting for about 3.5 million of them. Now, naturally, Sharjah and Ajman tend to be cheaper than Dubai, and because of the close proximity to Dubai, people tend to choose to live over there and then commuting to Dubai. Sort of like what New Jersey is to New York, essentially.
Correct.
If I were to take that example, if I were to talk about integration, we could maybe look at two major factors. Number one, the number of entry-exit points between Dubai and Sharjah. So there are 5 in total. 3 of them are federal highways. 2 of them are city streets. The rest of the area has been fenced off. So I used to work at a transport planning firm before, and I could see the amount of traffic being handled at some of the junctions. So of the 2 city streets I talked about, both of them are regulated by signals on the Sharjah side. One of them, on a regular working day, in a single day from a single approach at a single junction, you would witness 80,000 vehicles at a single entry point from a single approach at a single junction in a single day. These are mind-boggling numbers.
That is a lot of cars.
80,000 vehicles from a single junction, from a single approach again.
Yep.
Now, you can expect the federal highways to be of larger capacity, essentially, maybe 2 or 3 times as much.
It's requirement, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have that sort of capacity. But even so, you see, like, it's a chronic thing. Every working day, you see like 7-8 kilometer long queues of cars between these 2 cities across both the city streets as well as the federal highways, bumper to bumper traffic during peak times. This is something that can be solved by, number one, increasing the number of entry exit points. Instead of 5, maybe you could have like 6, 7. But perhaps the biggest impact would be through a solution for better public transport between these 2 cities. Or I should say an integrated transport solution for the entire urban area, really.
Yeah.
Back in 2018, I believe, a consultancy firm called Oricon had done a study on, whether or if the metro line were to be extended to Sharjah, what would the possible scenario be? So they concluded if the metro line were to be extended from the Green Line from there about 5 kilometers into Sharjah up until the Sharjah city center, the resultant traffic would reduce by up to 30%. And given the amount of traffic that conventionally moves between these 2 cities, given the amount of people that move between these 2 cities, it's almost guaranteed to be a commercial success. Even if you implement like let's say 10 dirham transit fee between these 2 emirates, if you were to take the metro, for example, if you cross the border, 10 dirham surplus would be added.
Yeah.
Even so, it would be, in my opinion, the most profitable line if a metro were to be implemented.
Right.
On top of that, Sharjah, you've got the direct line program, basically conducted by the Sharjah TV. It's one way of governance. Essentially, it asks people about their problems, and it is known that the ruler of Sharjah personally sometimes listens to this and directs people to find solutions for it. So one key solution proposed for through this method was the 3-day work weekend, basically in Sharjah, which was implemented back in 2022. 2022 for the government sector. This was out of a survey conducted. This was like the top priority for the citizens and residents of Sharjah. Number 2 was a metro line to Dubai. This is the demand there is for public transport, mass rapid transport between these two emirates. Now, the general public, people who are not exactly experts in transport planning, let's say, they would also argue that you could maybe simply widen the roads between these two emirates, but that is simply not viable. If you ask urban planners, transport planners, even sustainability experts, they'll strongly argue against this.
Yeah.
Number one, because it creates a bottleneck situation.
Yes.
Essentially, if you extend a road from 6 lanes to 8 lanes at a certain point, only to end up 6 lanes, like say 6 kilometers away.
Right.
It only, removes traffic from this spot. It brings up traffic to that particular spot, basically. So it isn't a viable solution.
Yeah. And just to sort of add on, what I like to tell clients who have a similar opinion,
right,
when there's traffic to their developments and so on, what I tell them is that yes, I see why you would think that would help, and I get where your thinking is coming from. But what you also need to factor in is there is always population growth as well, right? Almost like an invisible inflation that keeps growing. There is a population that keeps growing as well. So while, changing 6 lanes to 8 might have a short-term release for the next year, maybe,
right,
if at all, sooner or later, that's also going to end. And you'll have the same traffic situation now on 8 lanes instead of 6, regardless of wherever the road actually does end up, just because there's going to be that much more population. And if that is the thinking, sooner or later, you are going to run out of lanes, right? Sooner or later, you can't have a 50-lane highway, right? So the logic is flawed from the get-go. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add on. Sorry for cutting you off.
No problem at all. I absolutely agree with you. And this is a phenomenon agreed by new urbanists as well. Let's take a city which went with a conventional approach of widening the lanes. Let's take a look at Los Angeles, for example, a city known for being, car-friendly, full of highways, quite lagging behind when it comes to public transportation. Did that solve the traffic problem? No. The traffic is much worse than before.
Yeah.
The streets are always clogged with traffic. Now, Los Angeles is a smaller city population-wise compared to, let's say, New York. New York, I'm not saying is perfect in terms of transport planning, but Manhattan itself, in terms of land use, it's a very compact, high-density area, well-serviced by public transport through their, subway system, and it's very walkable because it's compact. The Manhattan area, if you look at movie scenes, for example, you always find someone walking through the streets of Manhattan, talking to each other.
Yeah.
These are walkable.
Yeah.
And the New York area has far greater population than the Los Angeles area does.
Right.
But even so, it has managed to solve this problem to a certain extent. Of course, outside of Manhattan, it's just suburbia, regular old American, car-friendly, car-dependent culture, really. But, what we try to propose, the ideal or optimistic solution for now, you could say, is to provide public with a choice, not just encouraging them to be car dependent. Like if you want to get from A to B, the choice
have a couple of options.
But right now we don't offer them a choice. We just say take a car. What we could do is maybe have a lane separately for buses, for example, so that whoever takes a bus isn't clogged up in such a patch of traffic. You're actually encouraging people to take the bus. Let's say 50 people commute to work. If they drive in their individual cars, let's imagine the amount of space they take. Now let's imagine these 50 people travel in one bus, the amount of space that bus takes. It's a huge difference. 50 people taking a bus compared to cars is going to have a significant impact on your traffic situation on that.
Yeah.
If you allow people access to public transport, these are cheap solutions as well. If you implement, let's say, bike lanes, for example, shaded bike lanes so that it's very convenient for people to commute. If you allow, let's say, small scale light rail like trams, for example, as you've seen in Abu Dhabi recently, these would have a significant impact. So choice is one. Diversity of choices, really. Public transport is a must. Rapid transport. That's metro essentially.
Yes.
And of course, the increase in entry-exit points between Dubai and Sharjah.
Right. Okay. Sal, I must be honest, you do strike me as someone who has given this a lot of thought. So maybe it's just my ignorance where it's all sort of, I'm just now connecting the dots, but I think you've already given this quite a bit of thought. So as we sort of reach the end of the episode, this is normally where I like to look forward.
Right.
And I'd like to ask you, for example, in a nutshell, what's next for you? What do you want to be working on? What kind of projects do you want to be going after? What would you like to see happen in the urban space? Kind of if we were to touch base again in a couple of years, where would we expect to see you? What would you be doing? What are you sort of working towards?
So I'm an urban planner. And like I said, urban planning is an umbrella term. It includes, urban design, urban economics, whatever you can think of.
Bit of architect in there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Landscape design too.
Yeah.
I would love to learn all of this if it was feasible, if it was possible. That's the curious person in me talking, really. But, something specific to my background in this part of the world, at the moment, the chances to find something in that sort of niche area, like you say, is pretty narrow. But I am optimistic because we are seeing Dubai realize this. We are seeing Dubai move towards disciplinary diversity, essentially. As we come up with, new concepts like new master plans and visions, there seems to be a requirement for people who have expertise in this. Like I've come across job postings for people who are urban planners, but also may have had an experience in, let's say, zoology. Now that's a first. I didn't know about that. Urban planners who are also ecologists. Yeah. And this is a very common thing in the West, right? You've got economists along with designers, ecologists, planners, geographers as well, working in tandem with someone from within the community. Essentially, it's a democratic process, and there's a sheer diversity involved in that. The downside, of course, is that it ultimately comes down to a game of compromise because you need to satisfy all stakeholders, and it takes a lot of time as well. But on the plus side, I would say that it's the quality of what's produced is unmatched, in my opinion, as opposed to something that's built solely for monetary benefits.
Right.
So in that regard, I am optimistic that Dubai is evolving in that manner, and I am looking forward to becoming part of Dubai's growth, really.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think if anyone's kind of heard the episode up to now, they have, like myself, probably have no doubt that you will be a part of that. And we're really excited to see the kind of work that you do, because I think it'll be very interesting over the next decade, like you said, for all the reasons that you said. I think Dubai, again, because of the history that I have with it in particular, I've just been here for that long, been actively involved in the design ecosystem for not that long, but a good amount of time. I do see the shift that you're talking about. And what I like to tell people is that if you look at the 2005 ambition, and if you look at the 2025 ambition, the drive is still there. It's just almost polar apart in terms of what they want to achieve. I think if you look at the 2005 ambition, it's always been about we want to be the number one in everything.
Correct.
Right? Although at that time, the focus was we need, the fastest this, the tallest this, the widest this. It was all the S of the world. I think that ambition is still there today, but it's the opposite, wherein we want to be the greenest, the most sustainable list, that kind of thing. We want the best public transport in the world. And that drive is still there. It's just sort of moved towards, in my opinion, the right direction now. Yeah. So I think the next decade is going to be quite interesting for someone like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone like yourself as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Dubai convinces you to get that cup of coffee in public transport, basically.
100%. I'd be up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
100% be up for it.
As part of the Master Plan 2040, one of the objectives is to provide much of the city access to public transport within 800 meters of reach. That's 10 minutes worth of walking distance. So get ready to get that cup of sustainable coffee through public transport, I guess.
I'm down for it, man. I'm down for it. So Sahil, as part of the show, we have something called the aForm tradition, which for the uninitiated is basically a bit of fun to end the episode on. What it is a question from a previous guest to the next guest, not knowing who they are. You don't know who asked the question. The person who asked the question doesn't know who's going to get the question.
Okay.
And to make our lives harder, we sort of throw them into one big pool of questions, and at random, we just sort of pick one out. So sometimes they're a bit of fun. Sometimes they get quite philosophical.
Okay.
So we'll see what you have drawn today. So let me see what you have. Just going to pull up our little question bank over here. Ooh, all right. Okay. Yeah, it's quite philosophical. So your question is, if there is one thing you want to know about the future, what is it? Or any other future? And I think by the context, what they mean here is, would you want to know any one thing about the future of someone else? Or would you want to know something about the future of your own future? You can take your time to answer
So
this.
the question is, if I'm right, would I want to know about someone else's future, or would
either something about your own future would you
Okay.
want to know,
Okay.
or would you want to know any one thing
Yeah.
about either your own future or someone else's future?
I would definitely choose the latter one. I would love to know about someone else's future. Getting to know my own future, it basically spoils the fun, doesn't it? You'll know where you'll end up in the next, let's say, 20 years.
Yeah.
If it's something bad, or even good, really, you essentially give up trying. Because let's say if you end up in a better position in the next 20 years, you'll just be like, I don't have to work hard. I don't have to
Yeah. It is going to happen
take the
anyway.
risk. It's going to happen. I may as well just have a seat on that sofa, lazy sofa of mine, eat junk food forever. I'll be better off tomorrow.
Yeah.
The same goes with, if it's something bad that's going to happen 20 years from now,
Yeah.
you essentially give up hope, right?
Why bother?
Why bother? It's going to end up really badly.
It's all going to go up in flames anyway. We might as well enjoy the ride.
Exactly. I think my take on that would be concerning human spirit and, the concept of hope, really.
Right.
Things like being resilient, being persistent.
Yeah.
Actually, I love this question. I love being philosophical on this matter.
Not that I'm trying to answer the question because I don't want to.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd want to know anyone's future. This might be the jaded Marvel Universe fan talking.
Right.
Because I feel like once you start going down that road, right? It's like, oh, but if I know, doesn't it like change the fact that I know? So isn't there going to be like something else that will happen? And I'm just talking about a bit of fun, but in reality, I think I do agree with what you're saying. Wherein I think there probably should be some mystery. I think we live in a world wherein we need to know everything sort of, defined, and therefore I can mentally put it in the box it needs to be.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think if there is a bit of mystery, it does bring out everything that you said. That's still a bit of hope, a bit of dread.
Yeah.
You don't really know what could happen, but you're kind of moving symbiotically the same way as a populace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have to add a bit of context as to why I chose to get to know someone else's future. It's got to do with happiness, I think. So let's say if I were to look into the future of my loved ones, if it's unfortunately not so good, I would love to make up, the journey towards that as eventful and as happy as possible. Like people say, right? It's not about the destination; it's about the journey there.
Yeah,
and that's about it. Really, it's not about like what's your girlfriend doing tomorrow. It's not knowing about that. Of course,
what? She's at the mall again. I knew it.
She's got to go.
Damn public space.
She's gonna go get coffee in public transport or something.
True. Well, Sahil, this has been a lot of fun, man. I think we can definitely have the conversation about transport, like you said, for hours, for sure. But I think we will definitely have you on again in the near future. Hopefully, there have been some strides and some developments that we can talk about.
Yeah.
So we wish you the best of luck for that. I have no doubt in my mind that you are going to do something or be part of something which is truly going to change the way that not just the city of Dubai and the city of Sharjah, but as a country, how we operate. It is ripe for someone to come in and really just push the needle a bit forward. So we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you, and thank you for organizing this. Really, I think you're giving a voice to people who've got stories to tell, whose voices wouldn't be heard otherwise. I guess you're playing the part of God in a way. You're connecting total strangers, I guess.
God's a bit extreme. I'll take Joe Rogan. I don't mind being the Joe Rogan of design. That's fine. But thank you. Yes, that is what the show has always been about. It's always been about people like yourself donating your time to the show. And hopefully, almost like the butterfly effect, through this conversation, if someone has heard something and they're able to action it or at least think about it, and if that results in some benefit, I think it would benefit all of us.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Cheers,
awesome.
man.
So thank you once again for coming on the show, and for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.